Sergeant William Dabney hit the water chest deep. The ramp dropped too early. 200 yards from Utah Beach, machine gun fire chewed the surf around him. The massive balloon canister strapped to his back pulled him under. He clawed toward air, broke surface. Saw Private Hayes face down in the foam, grabbed his collar, dragged him forward. German 88s screamed overhead. The beach erupted in geysers of sand and shrapnel. Dabney's boots found bottom. He hauled Hayes onto the sand. The private wasn't breathing. Behind them, the landing craft burned. Half their equipment gone. 32 men from the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion stumbled through the surf. The only black unit at Normandy. 0 air cover. The Luftwaffe would come at dawn. 6 hours earlier, the men had loaded onto LCT 544 at Portsmouth Harbour. Captain Morrison briefed them topside. The 320th would deploy 16 hydrogen balloons along Utah Beach. Each balloon tethered at 500 feet. Steel cables would shred any German fighter attempting a low-level run. Simple mission, critical mission. The entire 4th Infantry Division depended on balloon coverage. Without it, Stukas would tear the landing force apart. Dabney checked his roster. 32 men, 4 squads. Each squad responsible for 4 balloons. He'd trained them for 8 months at Camp Tyson, Tennessee. Every man knew the drill. Anchor the winch, inflate the envelope, deploy to altitude, lock the cable, move to the next position. They could set up a balloon in 12 minutes. But Camp Tyson hadn't prepared them for the channel crossing. Waves like mountains. Half the men vomiting over the rails. The landing craft pitched 40 degrees. Balloon canisters broke loose. One crushed Private Coleman's leg. The medic splintered it with a rifle stock. Coleman refused evacuation. Dabney didn't argue. They needed every man. At 0400 hours, the naval bombardment started. The men watched from the deck. Battleship shells screamed overhead. The French coast lit up orange. Explosions walked across the bluffs. For 20 minutes, the world was fire and thunder. Then, silence. Morrison appeared at the hatch. Time to load. The men filed down to the tank deck. 32 black faces. 200 white tank crews staring. Nobody spoke. Dabney positioned his men near the bow ramp. Hayes' squad on point. Washington's squad behind them. Then Lewis and Taylor squads. Each man carried 70 pounds of gear. Rifle, ammunition, gas mask, entrenching tool, plus their share of balloon equipment. The hydrogen canisters alone weighed 90 pounds each, 4 men per canister. They'd have to carry everything across 600 yards of open beach. The engines changed pitch, slowing. Morrison shouted over the noise, 5 minutes, check your gear. Dabney moved down the line, tested every strap, every buckle. He stopped at Private Roosevelt. The kid was 18, shaking. Dabney gripped his shoulder. Stay with Hayes, do exactly what he does. Roosevelt nodded, couldn't speak. The craft lurched, stopped. Too far out. Way too far. Morrison cursed. Ramp malfunction. They'd have to wade. Dabney looked at the water. Rough. Dark. At least 200 yards to the beach. With the canisters, they'd be lucky to make 50. The ramp dropped. Machine gun fire immediately. German MG-42, 1,000 rounds per minute. Tracers cut through the pre-dawn darkness. The first man off took 3 rounds and disappeared. Hayes hesitated. Dabney shoved him forward. Move, move, move. They hit the water. Dabney went under. The canister dragged him down. His boots found nothing. He kicked, lungs burning. Broke surface, gasped. Salt water in his mouth. He couldn't see Hayes, couldn't see anyone. Just darkness and muzzle flashes from the beach. Something grabbed his leg. Washington, blood running down his face, shrapnel from the ramp. Dabney pulled him up. Where's your canister? Washington pointed. Gone, sank. 3 other men surfaced nearby, empty-handed, 6 canisters lost already. Dabney pushed toward the beach. His boots hit sand. He stood, waist deep now. Machine gun fire ripped past his head. He dropped, crawled forward. The canister scraped on rocks. He could see the beach now. Grey sand, concrete obstacles, tank traps, no cover. Bodies already scattered across the surf line, most of them white infantry from the first wave. some moving, most not. He reached shallow water, stood again, ran, his legs burned. The canister felt like it weighed 300 pounds, 20 yards, 10. He dove behind a wooden obstacle, caught his breath, looked back. His men were spread across 200 yards of beach, some still in the water, some pinned down at the surf line. He counted heads. 26, 6 missing, dead or drowned. The mission was already falling apart. Hayes appeared next to him, bleeding from his shoulder. Caught some shrapnel, nothing serious. He still had his canister. Roosevelt was with him, alive, terrified but alive. 3 more men reached the obstacle, Lewis, Franklin, Moore, all with canisters. That made 6 functional balloon units if they could gather the rest. Dabney scanned the beach. The designated deployment zone was 300 yards inland, near the seawall. Completely exposed, German positions on the bluffs had clear line of sight, machine guns, mortars, artillery. Moving inland right now was suicide, but staying here was just slower suicide. He had to make a decision. Morrison crashed down beside him, face white. His radio operator took a round through the neck. Dead. Radio destroyed. No contact with battalion. No contact with Naval Command. Morrison looked at Dabney. "What's your status?" Dabney did the math. 6 canisters confirmed, maybe 4 more in the water. 10 total if they were lucky. They'd need 16 for full coverage. German artillery opened up. The first shells landed 50 yards short, in the water, geysers of spray and shrapnel. The second volley landed on the beach, direct hit on a tank trap. 2 men from Hayes' squad obliterated. The third volley walked toward their position. Morrison grabbed Dabney's arm. "We need to move. Now." Dabney shook his head. "We move, we die. We stay, we die. Either way, we're not completing this mission." A Higgins boat grounded 20 yards to their left. Ramp dropped. Infantry poured out. 4th Infantry, white soldiers. They scattered across the beach. One lieutenant ran past Dabney's position, saw the black faces, did a double take. "What unit?" 320th Barrage Balloon. The lieutenant stared. "Balloons. You brought balloons to this?" He laughed. Bitter. Insane. Then a mortar round landed 10 feet away and erased him. Washington crawled up, blood still streaming down his face. More men from the battalion behind him. Taylor, Jenkins, Patterson, each dragging a canister. That made 9. Dabney looked at the sky, still dark but lightening. Dawn in 20 minutes. The Luftwaffe would launch at first light. If the 320th didn't get balloons deployed, the entire beach would be exposed. Thousands of men. Sitting ducks for Stukas. But 9 balloons weren't enough. The mission called for 16. 16 balloons spaced evenly across 2 miles of beach. 9 would leave massive gaps. German fighters would exploit those gaps. Men would die. The question was how many? Deploy 9 balloons in the wrong positions and casualties could be worse than deploying none. Morrison was screaming into a dead radio, trying to reach someone, anyone. Dabney grabbed his arm. "Captain, radio's gone." Morrison looked at him, eyes wild. "What do we do?" Dabney had never seen an officer ask that question before, especially not to a Black NCO. "The mission's your call, Sergeant." Morrison said it quietly. Then he was gone, running toward the seawall, toward cover, toward survival. Dabney looked at his men. Hayes, Washington, Roosevelt, Lewis. 9 faces staring at him, waiting for orders. Behind them, more infantry hit the beach, hundreds of them. White soldiers who'd never spoken to a black man as an equal, who'd eat in separate mess halls back at camp, who'd call them every name in the book. But right now, those men needed the 320th, needed 9 balloons deployed perfectly, needed a black sergeant to make the call that would save their lives, or condemn them. The eastern sky was turning grey. Dabney could hear aircraft engines, distant, getting closer. He stood up. Dabney pulled the map from his jacket, soaked, barely readable. He traced the beach with his finger. 2 miles of shoreline, 5 landing zones, dog green, dog white, dog red, easy green. 16 balloons would cover everything. 9 balloons meant choices. meant gaps, meant dead men. Hayes crawled up beside him. "Where do you want us, Sarge?" Dabney studied the map. Infantry was concentrated heaviest at Dog Red and Easy Red, armor pushing through at Dog White. Naval Command would expect balloons protecting the main thrust. The book said spread coverage evenly, maximum protection for maximum troops. But the book assumed 16 balloons, not 9. He made the call. 3 balloons at Dog Red, 3 at Easy Red, 3 at Dog White. Leave Dog Green and Easy Green exposed. Fewer men in those zones, lower priority. The gaps would be half a mile wide. Any German pilot with eyes would see them, would exploit them. Men would die there, but more men would live at the protected zones. Hayes looked at the map. That's going to leave the flanks wide open. Dabney folded the map. I know. Get your squad moving. Dog Red, 300 yards north. Hayes hesitated. Sarge those white boys at Dog Green. Dabney cut him off. Move. Hayes grabbed Roosevelt and Franklin. They lifted a canister, started north, staying low. German machine guns chattered from the bluffs. Sand erupted around them. They made it 20 yards, dropped behind a burned-out jeep. Washington's squad took Easy Red. Lewis took Dog White. That left Dabney with 3 men and no balloon. Patterson, Jenkins, Taylor. He pointed at a canister half buried in the surf. That one's ours. We're going to Easy Red. Help Washington's squad deploy faster. The men ran to the water, dug the canister out, dragged it across the beach. A mortar round landed where they'd been standing 5 seconds earlier. They reached the seawall, a low concrete barrier running parallel to the beach. Engineers were already blowing gaps for the armor. Dabney's ears rang from the explosions. He found Washington behind a pile of rubble. The corporal had his squad setting up the winch. Good position, 15 feet from the wall, clear line to the bluffs. The hydrogen canister sat nearby, valve intact. Washington looked up. We're ready to inflate. Dabney checked his watch. EO 6:20. Dawn in 10 minutes. He could hear the aircraft clearly now. Multiple engines. Coming from the southeast. Stukas, probably. Maybe Me-109s. Without balloons, they'd strafe the beach unopposed. With balloons, they'd have to climb, lose accuracy, lose killing power. He grabbed the inflation hose. Do it. Washington opened the valve. Hydrogen hissed into the balloon envelope. The massive grey fabric started to swell. Slowly. Too slowly. Each balloon took 8 minutes to inflate. 8 minutes of standing exposed while German artillery zeroed in. Dabney watched the bluffs. Muzzle flashes everywhere. The machine gun fire was constant. Bodies piled up near the water. Medics worked frantically. Most of the wounded were screaming. Some weren't making any sound at all. A white colonel appeared at the seawall, saw Washington's squad, saw the balloon inflating. He walked over. What unit? 320th Barrage Balloon, sir. The colonel looked at Dabney. You're the balloon niggers. Dabney kept his voice flat. Yes, sir. The colonel spat. Where's the rest of your coverage? We were told 16 balloons. Dabney pointed at the map. We lost half our equipment in the water, sir. 9 balloons. 3 positions. The colonel studied the map. His face went red. You left Dog Green completely exposed. That's the 2nd Battalion 116th Infantry. 500 men. Dabney met his eyes. Yes, sir. The colonel stepped closer. You making command decisions now, Sergeant? Dabney didn't blink. Captain Morrison gave me tactical discretion, sir. Radio's dead. No contact with battalion. I made the call. The colonel grabbed Dabney's jacket. Listen to me, you black bastard. You deploy balloons where I tell you, not where you feel like it. I've got men dying at Dog Green because you decided they weren't worth protecting. Dabney stayed calm. Sir, we don't have enough balloons for full coverage. I positioned them to protect the maximum number of troops. The colonel shoved him back. Maximum number of white troops, you mean? Washington stepped forward. Sir, the balloon's ready. The colonel ignored him. I want 2 balloons moved to Dog Green, now. Dabney shook his head. Sir, that would leave Easy Red exposed. The 4th Infantry. The colonel's hand moved to his sidearm. I don't care about 4th Infantry. I care about my battalion. Move the balloons or I'll have you shot for insubordination. Aircraft engines. Louder. Much louder. Everyone looked up. The eastern sky was brightening. Silhouettes appeared against the dawn. 6 aircraft. Stuka dive bombers. The distinctive gull wings. They were 2 miles out, descending. Dabney pointed. "Sir, we've got maybe 2 minutes before they're on us. If we move balloons now, nobody gets coverage." The colonel released him. "Fine. Deploy what you have. But when this is over, you and I are having a conversation." He stalked off. Washington exhaled. "Thought he was going to shoot you, Sarge." Dabney grabbed the cable. He still might. "Get this balloon up." Washington and Patterson worked the winch. The balloon rose. 50 feet, 100, 200. The cable sang in the wind. At 500 feet, Washington locked it. The massive grey envelope swayed overhead. Steel cables stretched taut to the winch. Dabney looked north. Hayes' squad had 1 balloon up at Dog Red. The second was inflating. Lewis' squad at Dog White was struggling. Their winch had taken shrapnel. They were trying to raise the balloon manually. 3 men on the cable, pulling hand over hand. It was working but slow, too slow. The Stukas reached the beach. They spread out. 2 headed for Dog White, 2 for Easy Red, 2 for Dog Red. The lead aircraft at Easy Red rolled into its dive. The scream of the siren was inhuman. Dabney had heard recordings in training. Nothing prepared you for the real thing. The pitch climbed as the Stuka accelerated. 90 degrees straight down. The pilot would release at 1,500 feet, pull out at 1,000, standard Stuka doctrine, but the balloon was at 500 feet, right in his path. The pilot saw it late, too late. He tried to pull out early, released his bomb high, pulled hard on the stick. The aircraft shuddered, climbed, missed the cable by 20 feet. The bomb landed in the surf, killed nobody. The Stuka climbed away, smoking. Something damaged. Maybe the engine, maybe the airframe. It disappeared toward the bluffs, trailing black smoke. The second Stuka adjusted, came in steeper, 60 degrees, trying to drop under the balloon, but steep dives meant less accuracy. The bomb landed 50 yards inland, hit an ammo dump. The explosion was massive. Secondary detonations followed, shells cooking off, but no infantry casualties. The Stuka pulled out and ran, didn't attempt a second pass. At Dog Red, Hayes' squad had 2 balloons up. The Stukas there split. One tried to go between the balloons, found the cable spacing too tight. Aborted, dropped his bomb in the channel. The second Stuka went wide. Tried to hit Dog Green, the unprotected zone. His bomb landed in the middle of the 116th Infantry. 30 men dead instantly, 50 wounded. Screaming carried across the beach. Dog White was worse. Lewis' squad only had 1 balloon up. The second was stuck at 200 feet. Cable jammed. The Stukas saw the gap. Both dove together. Their bombs hit within seconds of each other. One struck a Sherman tank, blew it apart. The other landed in a cluster of engineers, body parts everywhere. The explosions triggered mines, more casualties. Lewis' squad kept working. Got the second balloon to 300 feet, but the damage was done. The Stukas regrouped over the channel, circled, assessing. They'd lost 1 aircraft, damaged another, dropped 6 bombs, scored 2 direct hits, 3 misses. From their perspective, it was a disaster. They should have killed hundreds. Instead, they killed maybe 80. The balloons had worked, not perfectly, not enough coverage, but they'd worked. Dabney watched them circle. They wouldn't attack again, not with balloons deployed. The risk was too high. Stukas were precision dive bombers. They needed clear runs, low altitude. The cables made that impossible. They'd report back. The Luftwaffe would send fighters instead. Me-109s. They could strafe above the balloons, but they'd lose accuracy. And fighters carried less ordnance than bombers. The beach was safer. Not safe, but safer. Washington was setting up the second balloon, Patterson and Jenkins hauling the canister into position. Dabney helped with the winch. The inflation went faster this time. 7 minutes. The balloon rose smoothly, locked at 500 feet. 2 balloons at Easy Red now, 3 total at Dog Red, 2 at Dog White. 7 balloons deployed. 2 canisters left. Hayes appeared at the seawall, out of breath. We got all 3 up at Dog Red. Coverage is solid. But Sarge, he hesitated. Dog Green is getting slaughtered. Germans have direct line of sight. No balloon coverage, no suppression. They're just shooting fish in a barrel. Dabney looked north, smoke rising from Dog Green, heavy smoke. He could hear the screaming even at this distance. The colonel's words echoed, "My battalion, 500 men." Dabney had made a choice. Protected Easy Red and Dog Red because the numbers were higher. Left Dog Green exposed because tactical doctrine said maximum coverage for maximum troops. But doctrine didn't account for the men dying right now. Men who could see balloons protecting everyone else. Everyone except them. Roosevelt stumbled over the seawall, blood running down his arm. Shrapnel. He collapsed next to Dabney. Sarge Lewis needs help at Dog White. Their third balloon won't inflate. Valves damaged. They're taking heavy fire. German 88s zeroed in on their position. Dabney looked at his two remaining canisters. 2 balloons, 2 zones that needed them. Dog Green, Dog White. He couldn't cover both. Aircraft engines again. Everyone froze. But these were different, deeper, American. P-47 Thunderbolts, 4 of them, screaming over the beach at 500 feet. They banked hard, lined up on the German positions. Their 50s opened up. Tracers poured into the bluffs. The machine gun fire from above slackened. The P-47s made 3 passes. Then they were gone. But the German guns stayed quiet, suppressed, for now. Dabney made his decision. Patterson, Jenkins, take a canister to Dog White. Help Lewis finish deployment. Hayes, you're with me. We're going to Dog Green. Washington stared at him. Sarge, you can't, the colonel ordered. Dabney cut him off. The colonel's men are dying. We've got 1 balloon left. They're getting it. Hayes grabbed the canister. Roosevelt stood up. I'm coming too. Dabney looked at his arm. You're wounded. Roosevelt shifted his rifle. I can still work a winch. They moved north, staying behind the seawall when possible, crossing open ground when necessary. German artillery was sporadic now. The P-47s had bought them time, but not much. At Dog Green, the situation was exactly as Hayes described. Bodies everywhere. The 116th had taken devastating casualties. Survivors huddled behind obstacles. Medics overwhelmed. Officers shouting contradictory orders. Nobody in control. Dabney found a lieutenant. Young, terrified. Blood on his uniform. Not his. Where's your colonel? The lieutenant pointed inland. Dead. Took around 10 minutes ago. Dabney scanned the zone. The Germans had perfect fields of fire from 3 positions. Without balloon coverage, the men couldn't advance, couldn't retreat, could only die. He pointed to a spot near the seawall. We're deploying there. Hayes and Roosevelt set up the winch. Dabney opened the canister, started the inflation. German machine guns opened up immediately. They'd seen the balloon, knew what it meant, tried to stop the deployment. Rounds sparked off the concrete. Hayes took one through the calf, went down, kept working, blood pooling under his leg. Roosevelt tied a tourniquet, crude, effective. Hayes gritted his teeth. Keep going. The balloon swelled. 4 minutes. 5. German mortar fire now. They were adjusting. First round landed 30 yards short. Second round 20 yards short. Third round. Dabney saw it coming. Grabbed Roosevelt, pulled him behind the winch. The mortar landed 5 feet away. Shrapnel shredded the balloon envelope. Hydrogen hissed out. The balloon collapsed. Mission failure. Hayes was unconscious. Roosevelt's tourniquet had saved his life, but he needed a medic. Dabney looked at the collapsed balloon, at the men of the 116th dying behind their obstacles, at the German positions firing unopposed. He'd made a choice. Maximum coverage for maximum troops. He'd done everything by the book, and Dog Green had been sacrificed anyway. The colonel appeared, saw the collapsed balloon, saw Hayes bleeding out. His face was stone. Sergeant Dabney. You're under arrest for gross negligence and failure to follow orders. Dabney didn't resist. Yes, sir. He looked at Roosevelt. Get Hayes to a medic. Roosevelt nodded. Couldn't speak. As they dragged Dabney away, the eastern sky continued to brighten. More aircraft appeared, but these weren't German. They were American, hundreds of them. C-47s dropping paratroopers inland, P-51s strafing the bluffs, B-17s bombing German positions 5 miles back. The full weight of American air power. The invasion was succeeding, but at Dog Green, the 116th, infantry was still pinned down, still dying. And the only black unit at Normandy was watching their sergeant taken away in handcuffs. 2 MPs shoved Dabney against a supply truck, cable ties cut into his wrists, blood from Hayes' squad still on his hands. The colonel stood 5 feet away, talking to a major, both pointing at Dog Green, at the bodies, at the collapsed balloon. Dabney could hear fragments, negligence, insubordination, court-martial. A shell landed 40 yards out. The MPs flinched, ducked. Dabney stayed upright, watching the beach. Washington's balloons at Easy Red held steady. Lewis had 3 balloons up at Dog White now. Coverage there was solid. Hayes' squad at Dog Red. All 3 balloons deployed. 7 balloons total. Maybe 8 if Patterson got the damaged one working. Not enough. Never enough. But better than 0. The major walked over. Captain Reynolds, 4th Infantry Division. He looked tired. "You're Sergeant Dabney." Dabney nodded. Reynolds studied him. "The colonel says you deliberately left his men exposed." "That true?" Dabney met his eyes. "We had 9 balloons, sir. Mission called for 16. I positioned them for maximum coverage." Reynolds pulled out a map. "Show me." Dabney traced the positions with his chin, hands still tied. 3 at Dog Red, 3 at Easy Red, 3 at Dog White. Reynolds looked at Dog Green. "Nothing here." Dabney kept his voice steady. "Lower troop concentration, sir. Tactical priority." Reynolds folded the map. "How many casualties at Dog Green?" Dabney calculated. "Maybe 100. Reynolds nodded slowly. "How many would have died if you'd pulled balloons from Easy Red?" Dabney didn't hesitate. "At least 300, sir, maybe more." The colonel interrupted. "He's lying, covering his ass." Reynolds ignored him, kept his eyes on Dabney. "You made a command decision, split the difference, saved the most men possible." Dabney said nothing. Reynolds turned to the colonel. "Your battalion took heavy casualties, Colonel, I'm sorry, but this sergeant did his job." The colonel's face went purple. His job was to follow orders. "My orders." Reynolds' voice went cold. "Your orders were what exactly?" The colonel hesitated. Reynolds continued. "Because from where I'm standing, this NCO adapted to impossible circumstances and deployed his unit effectively under fire." The colonel pointed at Dabney. "He left my men to die." Reynolds shook his head. "The Germans left your men to die, Colonel. This sergeant tried to save them. An explosion rocked the truck. German 88. Close, too close. Shrapnel pinged off the metal. One of the MPs went down, leg shredded. The other MP dropped beside him, applied pressure, screaming for a medic. Reynolds grabbed Dabney, cut his hands loose with a knife. "Get back to your unit, Sergeant. Deploy any remaining balloons. We'll discuss this later." The colonel started to protest. Reynolds cut him off. "That's an order, Colonel." Dabney ran. His wrists burned from the cable ties. Blood circulation returning. Painful. He found Washington at Easy Red. The corporal had the 3rd balloon inflating, almost ready. Jenkins and Patterson were there, their faces grim. Patterson spoke first. "Sarge, we heard they arrested you." Dabney checked the balloon. "How's Lewis' squad?" Patterson shook his head. "Lost 2 men. German mortar. Direct hit. But they got 3 balloons deployed. Washington locked the balloon at 500 feet. 3 balloons at Easy Red now. Solid coverage." Dabney looked toward Dog Green. The 116th was still pinned, still taking casualties, but the rate had slowed. P-47s were making regular passes, suppressing German positions. Without balloon coverage, Dog Green was relying entirely on air support. Dangerous, unsustainable. Roosevelt appeared, limping, arm bandaged. "Hayes?" Dabney asked. Roosevelt's voice cracked. "Medic says he'll make it. Lost a lot of blood. But he'll make it." "Where's the last canister?" Roosevelt pointed inland. "Behind the seawall. Valve's damaged, but I think we can fix it." Dabney grabbed Jenkins. "You're with me. Roosevelt, stay here." Help Washington maintain the balloons. They found the canister wedged against concrete rubble. The valve stem was bent, not broken, bent. Jenkins pulled out a wrench. I can straighten it, Sarge. Give me 5 minutes. Dabney scanned the area. German artillery was walking across the beach, systematic, searching for targets, each impact closer than the last. Jenkins worked fast, sweat running down his face. The wrench slipped. He cursed, tried again. A white private stumbled past, wounded. Guard shot. Dabney grabbed him. Easy, soldier. Where's your unit? The private couldn't focus. Eyes glazed. Shock. Dabney lowered him against the wall, applied pressure to the wound. Blood soaked through immediately. The private grabbed Dabney's jacket. Are you? He coughed. Are you one of ours? Dabney kept pressure on the wound. 320th Barrage Balloon. The private's eyes widened. The balloon niggers. You guys are here. Jenkins got the valve working. Sarge, we're good. Dabney looked at the private. Kid was maybe 19, dying. He needed a medic. But medics were overwhelmed, hundreds of wounded. Not enough hands, not enough supplies. Dabney made a decision. Jenkins, take this canister to Dog Green. Deploy it there. I'm getting this man to an aid station. Jenkins hesitated. Sarge Dog Green. The colonel. Dabney cut him off. Do it. Jenkins grabbed the canister, dragged it north. Dabney lifted the private. Fireman's carry. The kid weighed nothing. 90 pounds, maybe. Dabney moved inland, toward the field hospital. German machine gun fire tracked him. Rounds kicking up sand. He zigzagged, kept moving. The aid station was 200 yards behind the seawall, a cluster of tents, red crosses painted on canvas, medics working frantically. Dabney lowered the private onto a stretcher. A doctor appeared, took one look at the wound, shook his head. We'll do what we can. Dabney turned to leave. The doctor grabbed his arm. Wait. You carried him here, under fire. The doctor looked at Dabney's face, his uniform. You're with the balloon unit. Dabney nodded. The doctor studied him. We need stretcher bearers. Every man we've got is either wounded or working. You available? Dabney looked toward Dog Green, toward where Jenkins was deploying the last balloon. His unit was scattered, mission compromised. He could return, try to regroup, or he could stay here, help with the wounded, save lives instead of just protecting them. The doctor was still waiting. Dabney made his decision. Tell me where to go. For the next 4 hours, Dabney carried wounded. German, American, British, didn't matter. The aid station didn't discriminate. Blood all looked the same. He hauled men from the beach, from the bluffs, from burning vehicles. Some screamed, some were silent. Some died in his arms before he reached the tents. He stopped counting after 20. A British paratrooper, legs destroyed by a mine, kept apologizing. Sorry, mate, sorry. Dabney told him to save his strength. The paratrooper grabbed his hand. You're a good man. Dabney didn't respond. Just got him to the surgeon. Moved to the next casualty. An American tanker. Burns across 60% of his body. Morphine wasn't touching the pain. He begged Dabney to shoot him, end it. Dabney kept walking, got him to the tent, handed him to a nurse. She looked at the burns, looked at Dabney. Her eyes said everything. This man wouldn't survive the hour. Dabney went back to the beach. A German lieutenant. Gut shot like the American private, spoke perfect English, studied at Oxford before the war. He asked Dabney why he was helping. You're American. I'm your enemy. Dabney adjusted the stretcher. War's over for you, Lieutenant. The German laughed, bitter, coughed blood. The war's never over, even when we stop fighting. It follows us. Dabney didn't answer. The German died before they reached the aid station. By 1400 hours, the beach was secure. Engineers had cleared paths through the obstacles. Armor was pushing inland, infantry following. The German positions on the bluffs were either captured or destroyed. Casualties were being evacuated. The chaos of morning had settled into the organized violence of established beachhead. Dabney stood at the seawall, watching. His uniform was soaked with blood, none of it his. Washington found him there. Sarge, all balloons are holding. We've got full coverage now. 9 balloons operational. Germans haven't attempted another air attack. Washington paused. Jenkins deployed the last balloon at Dog Green. Colonel saw him do it, didn't say anything, just watched. Dabney nodded. Casualties. Washington's voice dropped. Hayes stable. Transferred to a hospital ship. Franklin wounded. Shrapnel. Minor. 2 men dead. Phillips and Anderson. Killed in the initial landing. Dabney closed his eyes. 2 dead. Out of 32. The 320th had lost less than 10%. Some units on the beach had lost 70%, 80%. The 4th Infantry had battalions that ceased to exist. The 116th at Dog Green was shattered, but the 320th had survived, had completed their mission. 9 balloons instead of 16, but 9 balloons that had changed the battle. Captain Reynolds appeared, Sergeant Dabney. Dabney straightened. Sir. Reynolds looked exhausted. I've been talking to battalion about what happened this morning. The colonel filed formal charges. Negligence, disobeying orders. Dabney kept his face neutral. Yes, sir. Reynolds continued. I reviewed the tactical situation, spoke to witnesses. The charges are being dropped. Dabney blinked. Sir. Reynolds managed a thin smile. You did good work today, Sergeant. Saved a lot of lives. The colonel's not happy, sir. Reynolds' voice hardened. The colonel lost his battalion because of German bullets, not because of you. He's looking for someone to blame. I'm not giving him that. You hear me? Dabney nodded. Yes, sir. Reynolds pulled out a cigarette, offered one to Dabney. Dabney took it. Reynolds lit both. They smoked in silence, watching the beach, watching the war move inland. After a minute, Reynolds spoke quietly. I saw you carrying wounded, all afternoon. You didn't have to do that. Dabney exhaled smoke. They needed help, sir. Reynolds studied him. You know half those men wouldn't sit at the same table as you back home. Dabney looked at him. I know, sir. Reynolds crushed his cigarette. You're a better man than most of them, Sergeant. Dabney didn't respond. Didn't know how. As the sun began to set, the balloons still floated overhead. Grey shapes against the orange sky. Steel cables humming in the wind. From the beach they looked peaceful, almost beautiful. But Dabney knew the truth. Each balloon represented choices, calculations, men saved, men sacrificed. The 320th had come to Normandy with 16 balloons and 32 men. They'd deployed 9 balloons and lost 2 men. By any measure it was a success, but success still tasted like blood and salt water and smoke. Washington approached again. Sarge, battalion wants us to maintain balloon coverage overnight. Shifts, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Dabney nodded. Set up the rotation. Washington hesitated. Sarge, what you did today, deploying those balloons, carrying those wounded, that took. He couldn't find the words. Dabney cut him off. It took 32 men, Corporal, not just me. Washington saluted. Yes, Sergeant. He walked away. Dabney watched him go. The beach was quieter now, sporadic artillery, distant small arms fire. But the fury of morning had passed. Thousands of men were inland, pushing toward objectives, securing the invasion. And overhead 9 balloons stood guard. Not 16. Not enough, but enough to matter. Enough to save lives. Enough to prove that the only black unit at Normandy had earned their place on that beach. But the war was far from over, and the questions raised on Utah Beach would follow Dabney and the 320th for years to come. Questions about duty, about sacrifice, about what it meant to protect men who would never see you as their equal. Those questions had no easy answers, maybe no answers at all, but they were questions worth asking, worth living, worth remembering. Because on June 6, 1944, 32 black men had faced them, had made impossible choices, and had proven that courage knows no color, even when the world insists otherwise. June 7th, 0600 hours. Dabney woke to the sound of aircraft. American. The sky belonged to the Allies now. He crawled out from under a supply truck. His back screamed. 4 hours of sleep in 48. Washington was already up, checking the balloons, all 9 still flying. The cables had held through the night. German artillery had tried to cut them, failed. The balloons were doing their job. The beach looked different in daylight, less chaotic, supply dumps everywhere, vehicles lined up waiting to move inland. The bodies had been cleared, graves registration working through the night. Dabney tried not to think about the numbers. 4,000 casualties on Utah Beach, dead and wounded combined. Fewer than expected. The balloons had helped. Not enough, never enough, but they had helped. A jeep pulled up. Captain Morrison. First time Dabney had seen him since the landing. Morrison's face was grey, exhausted. He climbed out slowly. Sergeant Dabney. Report. Dabney straightened. 9 balloons operational, sir. No equipment failures overnight. 2 men killed in action, 5 wounded. Morrison wrote in a notebook. Your tactical deployment. Who authorized that? Dabney kept his voice neutral. You did, sir. Gave me discretion. Morrison looked up. His eyes were hollow. Did I? He seemed to be trying to remember. The landing was a blur for everyone. Morrison closed the notebook. Battalion wants a full after-action report. Detail every decision you made, every casualty, every balloon position. They're reviewing the mission. Dabney understood immediately. Someone was looking for blame, looking to explain why Dog Green had been left exposed, why the 116th Infantry had taken such heavy casualties. The 320th made a convenient target. Morrison seemed to read his thoughts. I'll do what I can, Sergeant, but this is going higher than me. A week later, Dabney stood in a tent at battalion headquarters. 3 majors behind a folding table, maps spread out, casualty reports, equipment inventories. They'd been questioning him for 2 hours, going over every detail of the landing, every decision. Why 9 balloons instead of 16? Why those specific positions? Why Dog Green was left exposed? Dabney answered each question, kept his voice steady, stuck to the facts. The senior major, name tag read Collins. He leaned forward. Sergeant, let me be clear. The 116th Infantry suffered 243 casualties at Dog Green. Your decision to withhold balloon coverage from that sector directly contributed to those losses. Dabney met his eyes. Sir, we lost 7 canisters in the landing. I positioned the remaining 9 for maximum coverage. Collins shuffled papers. Maximum coverage for Easy Red and Dog Red, not for Dog Green. Dabney didn't flinch. Easy Red and Dog Red had higher troop concentrations, sir. Standard tactical doctrine. Deploy limited resources where they protect the most men. Collins leaned back. Standard tactical doctrine assumes competent leadership, Sergeant. Are you claiming competent leadership? The question hung in the air, loaded, dangerous. Dabney chose his words carefully. I'm claiming I followed my training, sir. Made the best decision possible with the resources available. The second major spoke up. What about the damaged balloon at Dog Green? You attempted deployment after the initial wave. That suggests you knew coverage there was necessary. Dabney nodded. Yes, sir. After the initial deployment, I repositioned remaining assets to fill gaps. The major consulted his notes. That balloon was destroyed before full deployment, because you were arrested. Dabney stayed silent. The major continued. The colonel claims you deliberately sabotaged that deployment, used the arrest as an excuse. That's not true, sir. Dabney kept his voice level. The balloon took a direct mortar hit, destroyed the envelope. Would have happened regardless of my status. The major wrote something down. After your release, you spent 4 hours as a stretcher bearer instead of returning to your unit. Why? Dabney hesitated. The aid station needed help, sir. Men were dying. The major looked up. Men were dying everywhere, Sergeant. Your job was balloons, not medical evacuation. Captain Reynolds entered the tent. The majors stood. Reynolds waved them down. Sit. I've been reviewing this case. He pulled out a folder, dropped it on the table. Sergeant Dabney deployed 9 balloons under impossible conditions. Those balloons prevented an estimated 400 additional casualties. The 4th Infantry Division credits the 320th with saving multiple companies from total loss. Collins cleared his throat. Sir, the 116th Infantry. Reynolds cut him off. The 116th Infantry walked into a kill zone with or without balloons. German positions there were fortified, pre-sighted. That sector was always going to be costly. He looked at Dabney. This sergeant made a tactical decision that saved lives. Hundreds of lives. I'm recommending him for the Bronze Star. Colin's face went red. Sir, with respect. Reynolds' voice went cold. With respect, Major, I was on that beach. I saw what happened. This NCO performed exceptionally under fire. Case closed. The Bronze Star never came. 2 months later, Dabney received a letter. The recommendation had been denied, no explanation given. Washington found him reading it, crumpled it into his pocket. Hayes was back with the unit by then, walking with a cane. They were in Belgium, supporting operations near Bastogne, still deploying balloons, still protecting men who wouldn't share a foxhole with them. One evening, Hayes sat beside Dabney, both cleaning rifles. Hayes spoke quietly. You think they'll ever tell the story, Sarge? About what we did at Normandy? Dabney didn't look up. Kept working the cleaning rod. Probably not. Hayes nodded. Figured. We're the only black unit that landed on D-Day. Nobody wants to remember that. Dabney paused, looked at him. Maybe that's not the point. Hayes frowned. What is the point then? Dabney resumed cleaning. The point is we were there. We did our job. Saved lives. Whether anyone remembers doesn't change what happened. Hayes considered this. Still feels wrong, Sarge. All those men we protected. None of them saying thanks. Some of them still calling us. He didn't finish. Dabney knew what he meant. Still calling them niggers. Still treating them as less than human. Even after everything. The war ended 9 months later. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion was deactivated. 32 men went home to 32 different towns. Some found work, some didn't. Hayes went back to Georgia, tried to register to vote. Was beaten outside the courthouse. Lost vision in one eye, never reported it. Didn't see the point. Washington moved to Detroit, got a factory job. Good pay. Until the white workers went on strike. Didn't want to work alongside colored men. Washington was fired. Roosevelt ended up in Chicago, became a teacher, spent 40 years in classrooms, never mentioned the war. His students had no idea he'd been at Normandy. One day in 1984, a researcher contacted him, writing a book about black soldiers in World War II, asked about the 320th. Roosevelt agreed to an interview, sat at his kitchen table, told the story, the landing, the balloons, Dabney's decisions, the casualties, everything. The researcher asked why nobody knew about this. Roosevelt shrugged. Same reason nobody knows about most of what we did. Doesn't fit the story America wants to tell. The researcher pressed. But you were at D-Day, the only black unit there. That's historic. Roosevelt smiled. Thin, tired. History's written by the people doing the writing, son, and they weren't writing about us. Dabney himself lived quietly, moved to Pennsylvania, worked construction, married, had 3 children, never talked about the war, not to his wife, not to his kids, not to anyone. He kept the letter about the Bronze Star in a drawer, never showed it to anyone. When his daughter found it after his death in 1991, she was shocked. Her father had been recommended for a medal. She researched the 320th, found nothing. No official records, no history books, no memorials, just a footnote in some military archives. 32 men who'd been at Normandy, who'd saved hundreds of lives, who'd been erased. But memory works in strange ways. The 4th Infantry Division veterans held reunions. At one in 1987, a survivor from Easy Red mentioned the balloons, how they'd saved his unit from being strafed. Another veteran remembered the black soldiers deploying them. Someone tracked down Washington in Detroit, invited him to the next reunion. Washington didn't want to go. His son convinced him. They drove to Virginia, walked into a hotel ballroom. 200 white veterans. Washington froze in the doorway. An old man approached, thin, cane in one hand, Purple Heart pin on his jacket. He studied Washington's face. "Were you at Easy Red?" Washington nodded. The old man's eyes filled. "You saved my life. I was pinned down near the seawall. Thought I was dead. Then your balloon went up. The Stukas pulled out, couldn't make their runs." He grabbed Washington's hand. "I never got to say thank you." Washington couldn't speak, just nodded. Other veterans gathered, shook his hand, thanked him, some crying, most just silent, trying to find words for something 4 decades overdue. Washington stayed for the whole reunion, told them about the 320th, about Dabney, about the decisions made that morning, about the 7 balloons lost, about the choice to protect some sectors and not others, about Dog Green. The veterans listened. Some had been at Dog Green, some had lost friends there. When Washington finished, an old colonel spoke up, former 116th Infantry. His voice shook. "We blamed you, thought you'd abandoned us." Washington nodded. "I know," the colonel continued. "We were wrong. You did what you could, made an impossible choice. We survived because men like you did your jobs, even when we didn't deserve your help." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. 200 veterans applauding one old black man who'd carried a balloon canister through hell and back. Washington wept. Not from joy, from exhaustion, from carrying the weight of being forgotten for 4 decades, from finally being seen. Word spread. Other survivors from the 320th were located. Hayes in Georgia, Jenkins in Texas, Patterson in California. They gathered at the next reunion, 12 of them still alive. Average age 75. They told their stories. Reporters came, articles were written, small ones, local papers mostly, nothing major. But enough. Enough for the men to know their service mattered, that what they'd done on Utah Beach hadn't been erased completely. In 1994, the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the Army finally acknowledged the 320th, a brief mention in official ceremonies, a plaque at the D-Day Museum, 32 names listed, 2 marked with stars, Phillips and Anderson, killed in action. Dabney's name was there, but he'd been dead 3 years, never saw the recognition. His daughter attended the ceremony, stood before the plaque, read her father's name. She thought about the man who'd never talked about the war, who'd worked construction for 40 years, who'd raised 3 kids, who'd died quietly. She wondered what he would have thought about the plaque, about the recognition 5 decades late. She decided he would have shrugged, said it didn't change what happened, that the point was never recognition. The point was doing the job, saving lives, making impossible choices, being there when it mattered. The story of the 320th didn't end with plaques or ceremonies. It lived in the men who survived, in their children, in their grandchildren, in the understanding that courage looks different depending on who's telling the story, that sometimes the heroes are the ones nobody wanted to acknowledge. That D-Day wasn't just white soldiers storming beaches. It was 32 black men deploying balloons, making calculations, choosing who lived and who had a better chance, carrying that weight for the rest of their lives. Washington died in 2001, Hayes in 2003, Roosevelt in 2007. One by one, the men of the 320th passed, taking their stories with them. But not all stories die with their tellers. Some stories survive in the gaps, in the footnotes, in the questions we ask about who gets remembered and why. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion landed at Normandy on June 6, 1944. They deployed 9 balloons, saved hundreds of lives, lost 2 men, returned home to a country that didn't want to acknowledge their service. But they were there, that morning when the world changed, when democracy itself hung in the balance. 32 black men stood on Utah Beach and did their jobs, not for recognition, not for medals, but because it needed doing, because men were dying, because the mission mattered more than the thanks. That's the story. That's the lesson. That courage isn't about being remembered. It's about showing up, making hard choices, protecting people who might never know your name. The 320th understood that, lived it, carried it home, and passed it down to anyone willing to listen. If this story moved, you consider subscribing. These voices deserve to be heard. These histories deserve to be remembered. Because the men who carried balloons through hell earned more than footnotes. They earned their place in history, even if it took 50 years to acknowledge it.